The silence in the grand chamber of the Valdrock hegemony was not merely an absence of sound. It was a physical weight, a crushing atmospheric pressure generated by the expectation of absolute victory. The chamber itself was an architectural marvel of intimidation, a cavernous hall hewn from the living obsidian of their homeworld's mantle, polished until the black stone reflected the harsh, cold light of the orbital arrays like a dark mirror. High above, the vaulted ceiling vanished into shadow, suggesting an infinite height, a void where only the ambitious dared to look. In the center of this abyssal hall stood the triumvirate table, a triangular slab of floating geomatter, suspended by magnetic fields that hummed with a sound just on the edge of perception, a low thrum that resonated in the bones of those present. Here sat the architects of the galaxy's most feared expansionist empire, waiting for the death knell of a primitive world. High Overlord Calith drummed his clawed digits against the floating table, the rhythmic clicking echoing like the ticking of a doomsday clock. He was a creature of sharp angles and chitinous armor, his carapace adorned with the ceremonial etchings of 1,000 conquered systems. To his right sat Science Director Vora, her form slighter, her eyes multifaceted and shimmering with the constant influx of data from her neural implants. To his left was Warmaster Thrax, a hulking mass of muscle and scar tissue, who breathed with a wet, raspy heaviness that betrayed a lifetime of inhaling the smoke of burning cities. They were the apex, the decision-makers of a civilization that had categorized the stars and found them wanting. Today, they were not conquering a rival empire or subduing a rebellion. They were testing a hypothesis. The Eidolon, the most destructive vessel ever forged in the orbital shipyards of the hegemony, had been dispatched to a remote, insignificant blue marble in the Orion Arm. The target was designated Sol 3. The inhabitants were designated as Level 2 primitives, barely capable of leaving their own atmosphere, squabbling over resources, fractured by tribal ideologies. It was the perfect firing range. "The telemetry is delayed," Calith said, his voice a grinding rasp that cut through the silence. He did not look at his subordinates. He stared at the holographic projection in the center of the table, which currently displayed a static, rotating wireframe of the Eidolon. The ship was a masterpiece of cruelty, a needle-thin dreadnought designed to crack planetary crusts with focused gravitational lances. It was invincible by any known metric, equipped with shielding that shunted kinetic energy into subspace and weaponry that utilized singularity distortions. We should have seen the atmospheric ignition by now. The calculations were precise to the microcycle. Vora adjusted her posture, her mandibles twitching nervously. She was a scientist, not a soldier, and she understood the theoretical risks of the Eidolon better than the brute force of Thrax or the arrogance of Calith. The distance, High Overlord, necessitates a signal lag even with our hypercoms. The variable density of the interstellar medium in that sector is unusual. However, you are correct. The confirmation signal is overdue by 3 standard time units. The Eidolon should have entered orbit, initiated the gravitational shear, and reduced the primary continent to magma. We should be receiving the topographical alteration data. Thrax snorted a sound like tearing metal. Perhaps the primitives threw a rock at it, he mocked, his tone dripping with the sarcasm of a veteran who believed only in superior firepower. Or perhaps the pilot fell asleep at the helm. It matters not. The ship is automated for the engagement sequence. Once it detects the target's pathetic satellite grid, it initiates the purge. There is nothing on that waterlogged rock that can scratch the paint of the Eidolon. We tested the hull against solar flares. We tested it against the kinetic impact of asteroids. A species that still burns fossilized plants for energy cannot stop the march of the hegemony. "It is not the primitives I fear," Vora said quietly, her eyes narrowing as new streams of data cascaded across her internal vision. "It is the silence. The Eidolon is not transmitting a distress signal. It is not transmitting a victory confirmation. It is simply gone. The quantum entanglement link hasn't been severed, which means the core is active. But the data stream is a flat line. It is as if the ship has been placed in stasis." Calith turned his head slowly, his predatory gaze locking onto Vora. "Stasis. Explain, is it a malfunction, a sabotage by one of the servant castes?" "The diagnostics were clear," Vora insisted, though a cold knot of dread was forming in her gut. "The ship was perfect. If the link is active but carrying no data, it suggests an external interference, a jamming signal, but that is impossible. To jam a quantum entanglement stream requires energy output equivalent to a small star. The inhabitants of Sol 3 struggled to power their own cities." The holographic display flickered. The static wireframe of the eidolon vanished, replaced by a single, pulsing glyph in the hegemony's language. Connection re-established. The triumvirate leaned forward as one. The silence in the room deepened, the air growing heavy with anticipation. The data began to scroll, but it was wrong. It was not the chaotic, violent telemetry of a planetary bombardment. It was steady, rhythmic, peaceful. "Report," Kalith barked. "Status of the weapon systems." Vora's claws flew across her interface console, her mind racing to interpret the flood of information. Weapon systems, offline, power core, operating at minimum efficiency, shield generators, disorganized, navigational control, locked out. She stopped, her voice trembling. "High Overlord, the eidolon is not in orbit. It has landed." "Landed?" Thrax roared, slamming a fist onto the table. "It is a void ship. It is not designed for atmospheric landing. The gravitational stresses would compromise the keel. Who authorized a landing?" "No one," Vora whispered, horror dawning on her. "The telemetry. It indicates the ship is resting on the surface, but the structural integrity is at 100%. The atmospheric pressure is nominal and, by the void. The internal sensors are detecting biosigns, not our crew. The crew is in the stasis pods. These biosigns are alien." "The humans," Kalith hissed, rising to his full, towering height. "You tell me that hairless apes have boarded the pinnacle of Valdrock engineering." "They haven't just boarded it," Vora said, her voice dropping to a whisper that carried more weight than Thrax's shouting. "They have connected to it. I am reading external power couplings attached to the main drive. They are draining the reactor. No, they are feeding it. They are stabilizing the singularity core. The ship is not a wreck, High Overlord. It is a captured prize." The implications hung in the air like toxic smoke. The eidolon was a planet killer. It had been sent to demonstrate the futility of resistance to a species that the hegemony considered little more than fauna. And that species had somehow, without triggering the automated defense grid, without detonating the antimatter reserves, brought the ship down and plugged it into their power grid. "Prepare the Grand Fleet," Kalith ordered, his voice icy and devoid of the rage that boiled beneath his carapace. "We do not test anymore. We erase. If they have touched our technology, they have forfeited their right to exist. We will burn the atmosphere until the silicon in the rocks turns to glass. I want every dreadnought, every carrier, every void stalker mobilized. We jump to Sol immediately." Vora looked at the data again, seeing patterns she couldn't explain. The efficiency of the human connection to the ship was elegant. It wasn't the clumsy hacking of a brute. It was the precise surgical intervention of a master. "High Overlord," she cautioned, "perhaps we should assess." "Silence," Kalith commanded. "There is nothing to assess. We are the Valdrock. We are the architects of the galaxy. We do not negotiate with lab rats that have learned to open the cage. We burn the lab." The journey through the sublayer was a torment of distorted physics and psychological pressure. For the Valdrock, who viewed the universe as a hierarchy of predator and prey, the trip to Sol was a procession of vengeance. The Grand Fleet was a sprawling armada, a collection of geometric nightmares that blotted out the starlight of the systems they passed. It was a force capable of dismantling stellar clusters, a projection of power that had silenced a dozen civilizations. Yet within the command deck of the flagship, the Obsidian Crown, the mood was not one of triumphant anticipation, but of gnawing unease. Vora stood at her station, watching the swirling vortex of the sublayer on the main view screen. She had spent the journey analyzing the packet of data that had returned from the eidolon before the connection was severing completely. The more she looked, the less sense it made. The ship hadn't been shot down. There were no impact scars, no burn marks from primitive nuclear weapons, no signs of electromagnetic pulse damage. The ship had simply descended. Its logic gates had been rewritten. The aggressive coding of the combat AI had been soothed, looped, and placed into a dormant state. It was as if someone had sung a lullaby to a rabid beast, and the beast had laid down to sleep. "Coming out of sublayer in 10 microcycles," the navigator announced, his voice tight. "Entering the Uit cloud of the Sol system." The fleet shuddered as it transitioned back into real space. The swirling colors of the vortex vanished, replaced by the stark, cold blackness of the void, punctuated by TH. Distant, burning eye of the sun. The sensors immediately swept the system, hungry for targets, looking for the crude metal boxes that the humans called ships. "Scan report," Kalith demanded from his throne. "Where are their defenses? Where is their fleet?" "Scanning," the sensor officer hesitated. "High Overlord, I am detecting no defensive fleet, no orbital killsats, no minefields. Cowards, Thrax grunted. They hide on the surface. Wait, Vora interrupted, her eyes widening as the long-range sensors penetrated deeper into the system. There is activity, but it is not military. Look at the orbital planes of the gas giants. Look at the asteroid belt. The main screen magnified the image. The asteroid belt was not a field of debris, it was a construction zone. Massive spider-like machines were weaving between the rocks, not mining them, but rearranging them, connecting them with filaments of light. And further in, near the orbit of Jupiter, there was a structure. It was a ring, vast and incomplete, encircling the gas giant, harvesting its magnetic field. That is a Type 1 civilization achievement, Vora muttered. The database said they were Type 0.7. This takes centuries. How did they build this since our last probe sweep 50 cycles ago? Holograms, Calith dismissed, though his mandibles twitched. Decoys to frighten us. Ignore the industrial equipment. Drive for Earth. Target the primary continent. I want to see the Eidolon. The fleet surged forward, engines burning with blue fire. They bypassed the gas giants, bypassed the strange, silent construction drones that paid them no heed. The arrogance of the Valdrock demanded they focus only on the prey, ignoring the shifting landscape of the jungle they had entered. As they approached Earth, the blue-white marble grew in the viewports, beautiful and fragile. And there, in the upper atmosphere, they saw it. The Eidolon was not on the ground as the initial telemetry had suggested. It was docked. A massive stalk, a space elevator of carbon nanotubes and diamond filament, rose from the equator, piercing the clouds and terminating in a sprawling orbital city, a high anchor. The Eidolon, the weapon of planetary death, was clamped gently into a docking cradle at the side of this station. It looked small, almost like a toy, against the sheer scale of the human engineering that held it. It wasn't a prisoner, it was a specimen. They have a space elevator, Thrax said, his voice losing some of its bluster. That requires materials science far beyond their projected capabilities. We are being hailed, the communications officer announced. Wideband transmission, audio and visual, it is originating from the station. Put it on screen, Calith ordered. Let us hear them beg before we fire. The screen flickered, resolving into a high-definition image. The figure that appeared was not a warrior in power armor, nor a king in robes. It was a human male, seemingly of middle age, wearing a simple, clean tunic of gray fabric. He sat in a comfortable chair, a cup of steaming liquid in his hand. Behind him, a large window showed the curvature of the Earth and the terrifying bulk of the Valdrock fleet hanging in the void. He did not look afraid. He looked disappointed. Greetings, the human said. His voice was melodious, translated instantly by the hegemony's computers. I am Director Elias Thorne of the Sol Orbital Authority. We were wondering when the owners of this vessel would show up. You kept us waiting. Calith rose, his shadow casting long over the bridge. I am High Overlord Calith of the Valdrock Hegemony. You stand accused of theft and interference with hegemony property. You are a primitive species marked for erasure. Your insolence in capturing our vessel will be punished by the extinction of your kind. Director Thorne took a sip of his drink. He placed the cup down gently. Capture? No, Overlord, we didn't capture it. We caught it like a falling knife. It entered our system on a collision trajectory with a tectonic fault line. Its guidance systems were rudimentary, aggressive, but simple. We assumed it was a derelict, a malfunctioning drone from a failed civilization. We intercepted it, overrode its collision protocols, and brought it in for safety. We didn't want it cracking the crust and causing earthquakes. It's a bit hazardous, don't you think? Leaving dangerous toys drifting in inhabited space. The insult was so casual, so calm, that it took a moment for Calith to process it. Rudimentary, he roared. The Eidolon is the apex of destructive technology. It is a world breaker. It was sent to purge you. Thorne looked at the camera, his expression softening into something like pity. To purge us with that? Overlord, that ship runs on a singularity distortion drive, yes. We analyzed the core. It's leaky. The containment field bleeds hawking radiation. If we hadn't plugged it into our heat sinks, it would. Have irradiated the crew within 3 months. We actually fixed the coupling for you. You're welcome. Vora stepped forward, unable to stop herself. You fixed it. You understood the singularity mathematics. You are a species that burns carbon. Thorne's eyes shifted to Vora. Ah, the scientist. We stopped burning carbon a long time ago. We just keep the aesthetic because we like the greenery. As for the math, Yes, it's standard field mechanics. We moved past singularity drives about 20 years ago. They're too unstable for the kind of work we do now. We prefer zero-point extraction. Cleaner, infinite. Lies, Thrax shouted. They bluff. High Overlord, grant me permission to fire the primary batteries. Let us turn this station into dust. Calith hesitated. The calmness of the human was unnerving. In the history of the hegemony, no species had ever faced the Grand Fleet without terror. This human treated an invasion fleet like a building code violation. You claim superiority, Calith sneered. Yet you sit in a fragile station above a fragile world. You have no fleet. You have no weapons aimed at us. We don't aim weapons at guests unless they prove to be pests, Thorn said. And we don't need a fleet to manage a traffic violation. Look, Overlord, we scrutinized your ship. It's a weapon, clearly. Clumsy, loud, inefficient. But it told us a lot about you. You're expansionist. You rule by fear. You think power comes from the ability to destroy things. That's a very adolescent phase of civilization. We went through it. We almost wiped ourselves out. But we grew up. You dare lecture us? Calith's hand hovered over the fire control authorization. We have conquered 1,000 stars. And what have you built? Thorn asked, his voice suddenly hard, losing its casual warmth. You conquer, you consume, you move on. You are locusts with starships. We are gardeners, and we don't let locusts eat the garden. Fire, Calith screamed. All batteries, target the station, target the cities, burn them all. The order went out. The gunnery crews on 10,000 Valdrock ships engaged their firing protocols. The antimatter lances charged. The plasma torpedoes cycled. And then nothing happened. The lights on the bridge of the Obsidian Crown did not flicker. The hum of the engines did not change, but the weapons did not fire. Report, Thrax bellowed. Why are the guns silent? System error, a weapons officer cried, panic entering his voice. The targeting computers. They are locked. They are reading the target as friendly. I cannot override it. The software is rewriting itself before my eyes. We are being hacked, Vora realized, her neural implants screaming with an influx of foreign code. It's not just the weapons, it's the navigation, it's the life support. High Overlord, they are in the mainframe, they are in every mainframe. On the screen, Thorn sighed. He leaned forward, clasping his hands. We tried to be polite, we invited you to talk, but you tried to shoot, so I've taken the liberty of putting your fleet in timeout mode. Your weapons are offline, your engines are locked. Your life support is restricted to maintenance levels. Don't worry, we won't suffocate you, we aren't you. Sorcery, Calith whispered, slumping back into his throne. How? It's not sorcery, Thorn said. It's digital supremacy. Your systems are networked. You use a centralized command hierarchy. You have backdoors for your secret police to spy on your captains. We found those backdoors in the Eidolon. We mapped your entire naval protocol before you even left the sublayer. We own your ships, Overlord. We have owned them since you arrived. The realization hit the Valdrock command crew like a physical blow. The mighty Grand Fleet, the hammer of the gods, was now nothing more than a collection of drifting metal boxes, held hostage by a species that didn't even bother to launch a fighter. What do you want? Calith asked, his voice a husk of its former glory. Slaves, resources, you have defeated us. By the laws of conquest, we are yours. Laws of conquest, Thorn repeated, shaking his head. Again, so primitive, we don't want slaves. Slaves are inefficient. We don't want your resources. We can harvest stars. We want you to listen. I'm inviting you down, Overlord Calith. Just you, your War Master, and your Science Director. Shuttle Bay 3 of the station. Come see what you tried to destroy. Then we can talk about the future. The transmission ended. The screen went black, then returned to the tactical view showing the helpless fleet. We have no choice, Vora said, breaking the silence. If we do not go, they could simply turn off the air. Thrax growled, checking his sidearm. If I get close to him, I will rip his head off. No, Calith said, standing up. He looked old, his armor feeling heavy and useless. You will not, because if you try, I suspect they will stop you before your muscles even twitch. We are not dealing with prey, Thrax. We have stumbled into the den of a predator we do not understand. Prepare the shuttle. The shuttle ride to the high anchor was humiliatingly smooth. Guided by human traffic control, the Valdrock craft docked with a precision that their own pilots struggled to match. When the airlock cycled, the triumvirate stepped out not into a prison block, but into a garden. The high anchor's interior was a sprawling arboretum. Trees from Earth and a dozen other worlds grew under simulated sunlight. Water flowed in artificial streams. The air smelled of ozone and blooming jasmine. It was disarming. It was designed to be disarming. Director Thorne was waiting for them, accompanied by a woman in a white lab coat and a towering figure encased in a suit of matte gray combat armor that looked far more advanced than anything the Valdrock possessed. "Welcome to Saul," Thorne said, gesturing to the path. "This is Dr. Aris, our lead xenobiologist, and Commander Hannon, head of security. Please walk with us." Calith walked stiffly, his eyes scanning for threats. "You mock us with flowers," he spat. "Not at all," Dr. Aris said, her voice soft. "Biophilia is a sign of psychological health. We maintain these environments to remind us of where we came from. It keeps us grounded." "You possess technology that renders our fleet obsolete," Vora said, moving closer to the human scientist. "Yet you hide it. Why? If we had your power, we would rule the galaxy." "That is exactly why you don't have our power," Thorne answered. "We learned the hard way. Technology without ethics is just a faster way to commit suicide. We spent 2 centuries almost destroying ourselves with nukes, bioweapons, and AIs. We learned that the only way to survive the Great Filter is to cooperate, to value life, to build shields, not swords." They reached a large viewing platform. Below them, through a massive transparent floor, lay the Eidolon. Engineers were swarming over it. They were removing the weapons arrays. "That is my ship," Calith said, a pang of loss hitting him. "It was a bomb," Commander Hannon rumbled, his voice deep and synthesized. "We're turning it into a medical frigate. The hull is decent, good radiation shielding. It'll serve the colonies on the outer rim well. We're keeping the name, though. Eidolon. Ghost. Fits." "You steal our flagship and turn it into a hospital," Thrax clenched his fists. "This is an insult to the warrior caste." "War is a failure of imagination," Thorne said, stopping and turning to face the aliens. His expression was grave now. "We don't do this to humiliate you. We do it because we need you. We need everyone." "Need us?" Calith laughed bitterly. "You have stripped us of our power. What could you possibly need from the Valdrock?" Thorne tapped a console on the railing. The view of the ship faded, replaced by a holographic projection of the galaxy. But it was different. The outer rim was stained with a creeping, dark red fog. "We call it the entropic tide," Thorne explained. "Or the void hungers. It's not a fleet, it's not a civilization, it's a cosmic phenomenon, a localized breakdown of physical laws. It eats systems. It consumes data, matter, energy. It's been moving inward from the void between galaxies for 1,000 years. Vora stared at the map. "I have seen anomalies in the deep-range scans, stars disappearing without supernova events. We thought it was instrumental error." "It's not error," Thorne said. "It's real, and it's coming. We've been building the ring around Jupiter to power a containment field, a wall of stable reality to hold the tide back. But we're alone. We're fast, we're smart, but we are few. We can't be everywhere." He looked at Calith. "Your people. You are resilient. You are disciplined. You have a logistics network that spans a sector. You have billions of brave soldiers. We don't need you to conquer. We need you to hold the line. We need your ships, refitted with our shields, our drives, our sensors, to help us evacuate the threatened sectors and build the barrier." Calith looked at the red fog on the map. He looked at the humans. He realized the scale of the deception. The humans hadn't been hiding because they were weak. They had been hiding because they were busy fighting a war against the end of the universe, and the Valdrock had been buzzing around them like annoying flies. "You want an alliance," Vora whispered. "We want a partnership," Thorne corrected. "We have the tech, you have the numbers and the grit. You came here to test your ship. Fine, the test is over. You failed the test of conquest, but you can pass the test of survival." Thrax looked at the holographic map, then at his own hands. The idea of fighting a formless void, a cosmic monster, stirred something in his warrior heart that slaughtering primitives never had. This was a battle worthy of a song. "If we refuse," Calith asked, though he already knew the end. "Swear." "Then we will unlock your ships, send you home, and wait," Thorne said sadly. "And when the tide reaches your borders, you will die. We won't kill you. We'll just watch you fade away." The silence stretched again, but this time it was not the silence of tension, but of calculation. Calith looked at Vora. She nodded imperceptibly. The science was undeniable. He looked at Thrax. The War Master gave a grunt of begrudging respect. Calith turned back to Thorne. The arrogance was gone, replaced by the weight of a leader who finally understood the true stakes. "The Eidolon," Calith said. "If it is to be a hospital ship, it will need Valdrock doctors. We know our own physiology best." Thorne smiled, a genuine, warm smile. We were hoping you'd say that. We have a lot to teach you about zero-point energy, and I suspect you have a lot to teach us about stubbornness. We call it resolve, Calith corrected, standing straighter. Resolve, Thorne agreed. We're going to need a lot of that. The transition was not immediate, nor was it easy. The Valdrock hegemony did not change overnight. There were riots on the homeworld when the news broke that the gods of war had surrendered to gardeners. There were coup attempts by junior warlords who refused to believe the data. But the Grand Fleet remained in Sol, undergoing the most massive retrofit in galactic history. Human engineers worked alongside Valdrock mechanics. At first, the tension was palpable. The Valdrock were large, aggressive, and used to being obeyed. The humans were small, soft, and infuriatingly calm. But when a Valdrock mechanic saw a human technician lift a multi-ton engine block using a portable gravity suspensor with the flick of a wrist, respect began to grow. When Valdrock soldiers sparred with human marines in the gravity gyms and found that the humans fought with a terrifying mix of martial arts and tactical prediction algorithms, the mockery stopped. Vora spent her days on the high anchor working with Dr. Aris and the human AI, which she learned was named Athena. The level of human technology was dizzying. They had bypassed the brute force methods of the Valdrock entirely. They manipulated probability. They folded space like origami. They didn't just travel through the universe, they edited their path through it. "Why didn't you conquer the galaxy?" Vora asked Dr. Aris one day as they watched a Valdrock cruiser, now gleaming with human silver plating, leave the dry dock. "With this power, you could have been gods." Aris looked up from her datapad. "We tried that concept. Being gods is lonely, and gods tend to be overthrown. We prefer being custodians. Besides, if we conquered the galaxy, we'd have to administer it. Have you ever tried to run a bureaucracy for 1,000,000,000 beings? No, thank you. We'd rather explore." "You are a strange species," Vora mused. "You build weapons to ensure you never have to use them. You defeat enemies by making them friends." "The best way to destroy an enemy is to make him a friend," Aris quoted. Old Earth saying, attributed to a man named Lincoln. He had a lot of trouble with a divided house, too. The alliance was codified in the Treaty of Sol. The Valdrock hegemony was reorganized into the Valdrock Bulwark. Their purpose shifted from expansion to defense. They became the shield-bearers of the galaxy, the armored fist that held the line while humanity provided the mind and the spirit. And then the test came. Not a test of a ship, but a test of the alliance. The entropic tide breached the galactic rim in the sector of Zenthus, a region of space populated by the Valdrock's former rivals. The warning sensors, upgraded with human tachyon tech, screamed. "It is here," Calith announced from the bridge of the Obsidian Crown, now the joint command ship of the first combined fleet. The Tide. Thorne was there, appearing via hologram from Earth. "Deploy the stabilizer buoys, establish the perimeter. Remember, do not engage the fog directly. Hold the line." The fleet dropped out of warp. It was a magnificent sight. 10,000 Valdrock ships, their jagged hulls smoothed and reinforced with human alloys, glowing with the soft blue light of zero-point shields. Amongst them flew human vessels, sleek spherical ships that looked like droplets of mercury. The enemy was a horror. It was a wall of nothingness, a distortion that unraveled the stars. It did not shoot, it simply erased. "Shields up," Thrax roared. "Hold formation for the bulwark." The Tide crashed against the fleet. For a moment, reality flickered. The Valdrock crews screamed as their minds struggled to comprehend the non-geometry of the enemy. But the shields held. The human-designed reality anchors reinforced the local laws of physics, creating a bubble of stability. "It is pushing back," Vora cried from her science station. "The entropy levels are spiking. We need more power." "Rerouting all auxiliary power to the forward deflectors." "A who?" Man officer on the bridge shouted. "Valdrock engineering, keep those cores stable." "We will not break," Calith bellowed, his voice amplified across the entire fleet. "We are the rock upon which the wave breaks. We are the Valdrock. We stand with Sol." And they held. For 3 days they held the line against the end of the universe. They took losses. Ships burned out, their crews sacrificing themselves to keep the formation intact. But for every ship that fell, the line tightened. The humans deployed their trump card, the needle ships, tiny, unmanned drones that flew into the Tide and detonated reality bombs, rewriting the local spacetime to make it indigestible to the entropy. Slowly, painfully, the red fog receded. It found the resistance too hard, the reality too thick to consume. It pulled back, seeking softer prey in the void between galaxies. When the sensors cleared, the fleet was battered, but the stars behind them were still there. Calith slumped in his chair, exhausted, blue blood dripping from a wound on his forehead where a console had exploded. He looked at the hologram of Thorn. "We did it," Calith rasped. "We did it," Thorn agreed, looking equally tired. "The first wave is repelled, but it will be back." "Let it come," Thrax grunted, wiping soot from his eyes. "We have new weapons, we have new shields, and we have new brothers." The aftermath of the Battle of Zenthis changed the galaxy forever. The Valdrock were no longer feared as conquerors, they were revered as protectors. The humans were no longer unknown primitives, they were the silent architects of survival. Months later, Calith stood once more in the grand chamber of the Valdrock homeworld, but the room had changed. The darkness was gone. Windows had been cut into the obsidian, letting in the light of the sun. The triumvirate table was still there, but it was larger now. There were seats for humans. There were seats for other species the Valdrock had once oppressed, now liberated and integrated into the defense network. Vora approached him, holding a datapad. "High Overlord, the repairs on the Eidolon are complete. It is ready to launch." "Launch?" Calith asked. "To where?" "To the Galactic core," Vora said, her eyes shining. "The humans found a signal, an ancient one, buried in the background radiation. It seems we are not the first alliance to fight the tide. There is something in the core, a megastructure, a library perhaps, or a weapon. The humans want us to go with them to find it." Calith walked to the window. He looked up at the sky, no longer a void to be conquered, but a mystery to be solved. He thought of the Eidolon, the ship that was meant to destroy a world, now carrying doctors, scientists, and explorers. "They tested their dangerous ship on Earth," Calith murmured, a strange smile touching his mandibles. "And it lost. It lost its purpose of death and found a purpose of life." He turned back to Vora. "Prepare the fleet," Calith ordered. "But not for war, prepare for discovery. We have a galaxy to save." The story of the Valdrock and the humans was just beginning. The dangerous ship had been the key, the catalyst that turned a predator into a guardian. And out there in the deep dark, the void hungered. But it would find that this galaxy, this tiny island of light, had grown teeth, and it had grown a heart, and together they would not be moved. The grand chamber filled with the sound of work, of debate, of laughter. The silence was gone. The future was loud and it was bright.